NHL insiders link the Leafs to a massive defenseman and the real reason behind the Vladimir Tarasenko trade. I'll get into all this later on this episode. Before I start, I'm happy to say this episode is once again sponsored by Rentals.ca. Moves are coming, with all rumors and reports that have been coming out around the league. Fans have been expecting for a lot of major shakeups around the league, which would definitely be exciting for hockey fans. And if you feel like you need some extra excitement in your life, then it's time to move, and Rentals.ca has you covered. Rentals.ca is Canada's largest apartment hunting network. You can rent houses, apartments, condos, whatever it is, Rentals.ca has you covered. From coast to coast, you can go straight to Rentals.ca, where the website is super clean and easy to use. My favorite thing about the website is actually the interactive map. The map, you can pinpoint exactly where you want to move, where your next location will be, where your next condo might be. Whatever it is, Rentals.ca has you covered. Check out Rentals.ca in the pinned comment or in the description below. They're a huge supporter of the NHL and this channel, and they love hockey just as much as we do. So make sure to check out Rentals.ca if you want to start a new life or just carry on your current life in a new location. But with that, let's hop straight into the first topic today, which is the real reason behind the Vladimir Tarasenko trade. Now, when you do look at this, Frank Schiavelli did come out today and say that Vladimir Tarasenko has been traded to the Florida Panthers. So the full trade breakdown is Vladimir Tarasenko at 50% retained, and the Ottawa Senators get a third-round pick in 2025 and a conditional 2024 fourth-round pick. The fourth-round pick becomes a third if the Panthers win the Stanley Cup. Now, at first glance, you might look at this and say, hey, this is not a huge return from a guy like Tarasenko going from the Sens to Florida, but there is a huge thing to look at with this. So Darren Drager says, curious amount of the gripping over the return for Tarasenko. His family is in Florida and has a full no movement clause. Under the circumstances, I think Ottawa did pretty well. And I do agree with this as well. Tarasenko just came over as a UFA. The Sens got him for completely free, remember this, in free agency, minus the fact they had to pay him $5 million. And with them retaining half, that means the Florida Panthers are taking back the $2.5 million cap hit, minus everything that you take out with the NHL when you get closer to deadline, how it's a smaller cap. But overall, the Sens might be looking at 2 third-round picks for a guy that they got for completely free. I mean, when you do look at Tarasenko, yes, he's going to be great when he gets on the Florida Panthers. Just this year in 57 games, he has 17 goals, 24 assists for 41 points. He's a plus 13. This guy you can deploy in your top 6, your middle 6, on the power play. He has 30 block shots and 54 hits. Yes, he did come off a surgery a couple seasons ago, but him having 17 goals and looking like he might be on a 30-goal pace is quite a big add for the Florida Panthers. But before I look at the Florida Panthers with Tarasenko, I do want to look at the Sens. As I said, Sens fans, you're getting potentially 2 third-round picks for a guy that had a no-movement clause. This guy could have looked at the Sens management and said, hey, I want to go to Florida. I don't care what it takes. Send me to Florida. The Panthers could have looked at them and said, hey, we're going to offer you a 7th. What are you going to say? He only wants to come here. So the fact they did get at the worst a 3rd and a 4th, and at the very best 2 thirds, I do think this is a fine trade for the Sens. And I think this might be an excellent trade for the Florida Panthers. I mean, you acquire this guy for, I said, like a 3rd or 4th, or at most 2 thirds. And then you do look at the Panthers forward group. And in my opinion, it's quite loaded. I mean, if you just look at the top 9 of this group, Verhaeghe, Barkov, Reinhart, Cousins, Bennett, Tkachuk, Rodriguez, Lundell, and then Tarasenko on the third line right wing, I think this is going to be quite hard to play against. I mean, we've seen this team in the playoffs last year make the Stanley Cup Finals. They're the top team in the East. They're looking like one of the strongest teams. Bobrovsky looks outstanding. Ekblad's back and healthy. And overall, this team's going to be hard to play against. There is a lot of rumors flying around that Max Pacioretty also wants to join the Florida Panthers. So it's going to be interesting to see if they make another trade to bring in another veteran guy that has some playoff experience to make their run and hopefully win a Stanley Cup. So what's your guys' thoughts on this? Do you think the Sens could have got more? In my opinion, I don't think they could have, as he pretty much had them at what he wanted to be traded to, and that team was the Florida Panthers. And what's your thoughts on the Panthers? Do you think this really pushes them to be a Stanley Cup finalist team, or do you think they might fold in the playoffs? Let me know down in the comments. But with that, let's hop straight into the second topic, which is Leafs are linked to Colton Parayko. Now, David Pagnotta of the Fourth Period came out and said, the Maple Leafs, Senators, and Flames are believed to have interest in Colton Parayko. And I really want to focus on the Leafs on this. As a Leafs fan, I just want to say this guy would be one of the best defensemen we've had on the right side in quite some time. I think we've went out and got some solid pieces. Like I said, Luke Shen was a great ad last year. Obviously, he left and now is in Nashville. I think Bush, in his second stint with the Leafs, has looked good. But this is a big body. This is a guy that we haven't had in quite some time. And I think he might be the perfect fit for the Leafs. Now, with Parayko, obviously, he does have a full no trade clause, which would have to be waived to accept a deal, and he hasn't been asked yet. Obviously, it's just Wednesday. We do have 3 days, if you include today, before the NHL deadline. But the big thing with Parayko is his Stanley Cup experience, his experience in the playoffs, him being a big body. There is a bit of concern with his term, but this is a guy that I think fits on any team as your top pairing right defenseman, and I think would fit beautifully next to a guy like Morgan Rielly. So you do look at Colton Parayko. This year in 62 games, he has 9 goals, 12 assists for 21 points. He's a +8 with 165 blocks and 83 hits. Obviously, this guy's had seasons back in 2018-19, 19-20, where he scored 10 goals twice. He actually had back-to-back seasons where he put up 28 points exactly. He had a 35-point season just last year. He had 27 points. But this guy is coming in to be a physical specimen, a guy that's going to lay the body and just change the outcome of what the Leafs might look like. Obviously, the big thing I wanted to talk about was the cap hit. So Parayko is coming in at $6.5 million. He signed this season at 2023-2024, all the way until 2029-2030, which would be his last season. As I said, Parayko is a big body, 6'6", 228 pounds, but him being 30 years old and still having the 6 years left on his contract does add a tiny bit of concern. Yes, we've seen him slow down maybe a tiny bit since he won a Stanley Cup, but this is a guy that each game, each year, whatever it takes, he puts his body on the line, blocking shots, hitting. He has an awesome slap shot from the point, and I think he adds something this Leafs team has missed since I can't even think of a guy that we had that was 6'6", playing the right side in a time where the Leafs really need more physicality. We've seen them go out and look for guys like Chris Tanev, Nikita Sidorov. All these guys are UFAs, but when you look at Parayko, you have this guy for the future. This is a guy that can come in and fit into this entire team of Matthews, Nylander, Morgan Rielly, Tavares and Marner if they sign. I think he's a guy they need to look at. And when you just look at the defense appearance, TJ Brodie, Timothy Liljegren, Morgan Rielly, Lyubushkin. I really like this addition of Lyubushkin. He's looked great both games he's played for the Leafs. And Benoit and McCabe. The big thing with this is you need to look at salary going out. Obviously, the first thing you can think of is, hey, let's move out a guy like TJ Brodie. I do think Brodie does get a lot more flack than he deserves. I think he's a guy that really plays his cards right, but the problem is sometimes he gets put with a defensive partner that might not work. I do think him and Timothy Liljegren looked outstanding during the absence of Rielly, but they did struggle a tiny bit last game. So maybe this is where you look at possibility of moving out Brodie, Liljegren, maybe a guy off the main roster. Whatever it might take, you need to really go out and get a guy like Parayko. I can't say it enough. We've seen so many seasons where the Leafs are linked to guys like Parayko, Tanev, Sidorov, and none of them ever happen. And this is where I think the Leafs just need to just kind of swallow the pill and say, hey, we're going to give up whatever it takes. Yes, in 4 or 5 years, Parayko might not be what he is right now. Look at moving him out during that span. I mean, we've seen the Montreal Canadiens go out and get Shea Weber in a trade that looked a little risky when they got him. They ultimately went out and made it to the Stanley Cup Finals. You need to make risks, and I think bringing in the 6'6" behemoth is what the Leafs need. As I said, he lays the body. He had 144 hits last year, 115 hits, 144 blocks. This guy knows how to lay the body. He's been in the Stanley Cup playoffs. He knows what it takes, and I think the Leafs just need to say, hey, we want you. What is it going to take? Obviously, they don't want to move out guys like Fraser Minten, Easton Cowan. Nick Robertson's a weird one where it looks like the Leafs are either just actually putting him into the minors to be compliant with the cap since he was the only guy that could be sent down without waivers. But he could also be a player that maybe they move out in a deal. I know right now St. Louis does want to clear up cap space. They want to get more cap going into deadline. We've seen them try to move Torrey Krug to the Philadelphia Flyers to start the year. He obviously said no to this. The deal did not go through. So it seems like they're opening to moving people. They are out of the playoff. They do have an easy schedule, but banking on this and not getting assets is not the greatest idea. And it seems like the Leafs are serious suitors for Parayko. So what's your thoughts on this? Do you think Parayko is the perfect fit? Do you think his contract might be too long, so you want to stray away and maybe go out and get a cheaper defenseman? I know we said Bogosian. He ultimately did get signed by Minnesota, but a guy in that caliber. And what's your thoughts? What would you give up? Would you give up a guy like Timothy Liljegren, maybe a pick and a prospect? Whatever it might take, let me know down in the comments what's your thoughts on Colton Parayko. And talking about comments, let's get into everyone's favorite topic, which is comments of the day. And the comment of the day comes from Braun Snake. And he says, if my sweet wife keeps giving me a hard time because I want to buy another guitar, moves will be on the way. LOL. I wanted to add this in. I thought that was a hilarious thing. I thought this was great. And if you want to move because your wife won't let you buy a guitar, make sure to go down in the comments, in the pinned comment or the description. Rentals.ca has you covered. Like I said, they're a huge supporter of this channel and the NHL. So make sure to check out Rentals.ca for any of your moving needs. But that'd be it for this episode of Hat Trick HQ. If you wanted to leave a comment, let us know where you're from. I know a lot of people are leaving comments where they're from, and it was just awesome to see that we're gone worldwide. And with that, take care and have a great day.